Hello, my name is Debbie, Owl and Gator Stitcher. Welcome to Flosstube number 6. Today is Wednesday, March 24th, 2021. This is a video primarily about cross stitch, a little bit about reading and what I'm watching, and life thrown in. Thank you to everyone who has watched my previous videos, and those of you watching today, if this is your first one, welcome. I look forward to seeing all of your comments and interacting with you. I've been doing this now for a couple of months and it's been a really positive experience, so thank you to everyone who has supported me. Over the past couple of weeks, not too much exciting happened until Monday when my husband and I were able to get our first vaccinations. We're getting the Pfizer vaccination, which means that we have to go back in a couple of weeks for our second shot. We already have that scheduled. We are really looking forward to getting out and about and doing things after we have gotten our second vaccination and we've reached, I don't want to say full immunity, but as immune as we can with the current vaccines. We have really lived a quiet life for this past year, and I'm just looking forward to going out and doing things that I haven't had a chance to do, just sort of routine life things. My husband and I were talking about going back to the gym. I want to go get a pedicure, things that we could have done if we wanted to, because I live in Florida and Florida doesn't have many restrictions as long as you are wearing a mask in our county. Most places are open and want your business, but my husband and I have made the decision to stay home. So I'm really looking forward to just getting out and doing a few of those things and returning a little bit to life going back to normal. But you're here mainly for the cross stitching, so why don't I go ahead and start showing that. If you've watched my previous videos, you know that I am involved in a lot of challenge groups on Facebook just to keep my interest peaked and help to direct what I'm stitching on. So the first project I'm going to show you, in fact, I'm going to show you all my full coverages first that I've worked on. The first one I am working on is Artecy's Evening Romance, artwork by Mark Keathley. This is a project that I pulled out this month for letters of the month. I'm working on E and F, so this is E for Evening Romance. I got about 500 or so stitches in, so basically just filled in a little bit more here. This whole piece is very confetti heavy. It's rare that you will have 2 or 3 stitches together that are not the same color. There may be this sort of, I think there's a lot of 407 in here going up and around, but there are very few stitches together. And this is a paper pattern I have, so I don't have it in Pattern Keeper, so it's a little bit slow going, but I love the way this is coming out. You can see this previous page that I worked on and just the detail of the trees. And so I am, this is a project that's very fun to work on. I love to see as things sort of appear, and it does take a while for them to appear simply because of the way that the stitches are laid. But then all of a sudden when it appears, it really pops out. So this is Evening Romance by Artecy. Next piece that I worked on is my oldest WIP, my oldest project. This is Artecy's Old World Map, the large version. So I was trying to do this on the diagonal and I started it in the upper right. So I started it over here. Yes, over here. And so I'm sort of in this area right here. This one I do have on Pattern Keeper now, and so I made a decision to stop working on the diagonal. So what I worked on over the past couple weeks was finishing to pull in all of the various part threads. So it was mainly down in here, so you can see this is why it looks like a lot of confetti. I then sort of went and I'm now working on the sky up there. So I am moving much more quickly now that I have this in Pattern Keeper and I'm not doing it in the diagonal. I know that you can see where some of the threads have traveled. You can see my finger there and there are some threads there, but again, because this is a full coverage, it will all get covered up and I'm not terribly worried about them showing through. I love some of the details now that I'm also starting to see come out. So here we've got this little guy, his head is just sort of leaning against this figure here. And I just love the way that it sort of pops out. Until I got all the stitches in, I didn't really know what that was going to be. And now he just sort of has popped out. And so this is stitching up really nicely. I'm also glad that I have a chance to work on this because maybe if not in 2021, in 2022, we'll all get to travel again. I'm also using that piece for Supernatural Stitches. One of the prompts this week was to work on a project that references geography. Obviously that's a map. So it definitely references geography. And so I thought that it just fits in. And again, I try to work on that for a half hour, 45 minutes every day. Doesn't always happen, especially if my mornings are busy, but when I do get a chance, it's great to see progress on it. And now obviously with Pattern Keeper, I can watch the percentage go up and up as I work on it. The next full coverage that I worked on was the Little Cake Shop. This is a Heaven and Earth Designs, artwork by Aimee Stewart. Oh, sorry. So I am working in the upper corner here, and you can see all this pink here. So that is where I am right now. This was one I had also started in the diagonal, and when I switched it to Pattern Keeper, I made the decision also then to pull all the threads out as well. I was a bit reticent to do that at first because this is a max color, so I think there's about 245 colors in it. I was worried that with all these various shades of pink, I would just get lost, but so far it hasn't been a problem. So what I've done is I pulled in all the threads I had, and so now for the most part I am going down and just filling in the stripes. Although here, this is the molding on the ceiling that goes across. So this coming over here will be more of a blue, but I'm still a long way off from that. My other pieces I showed you were just on 18 count Aida. This is a 22 count ivory Jobelin, and I'm only using one strand on this, but I think the coverage has been great. I'm really enjoying this project. I've found excuses to pull it out. One of the challenges I'm doing through Semi-Sane Stitchers is something called Master Stitch, which is based on the game where you have to guess 4 colors and the order they go in. So red, pink is considered one color, and so whenever I need to have that, this just works out really well to pull this out, put in 100 stitches really quickly, and I have that ready to go so that I can put it in the order that I need. So again, Little Cake Shop by Heaven and Earth Designs. The last full coverage I worked on was, that I'm going to show you today, is Midnight Vigil, Heaven and Earth Designs, artwork by Lisa Parker. So this was one that I started at the very end of 2020 to get it in, to get it going so that I could use it because I'm doing no new starts this year. And this one has just been flying. Right now, this is the curtain on the side of the window. So a lot of just, you can see this black going down and some dark blues here. But once I get the thread going, it's fairly easy to follow. It's basically straight lines down. The width might vary a little bit, but it's not jumping all over the place. So I've been able to work on this very quickly. One of the groups that I'm in, Myth and Magic, which is a game where you are basically, I don't want to say stitching for speed, but trying to get in stitches to earn ingredients. And they had a stitch one, get one free. So I pulled this one out because it was so quick to stitch on and to get a lot in so that I could get a higher level ingredients and then double it. Unfortunately for Myth and Magic, my team is no longer in this round. We were doing really, really well, but I think all of us got distracted and we sustained an attack, and we mostly healed, and we had what we needed to heal again. Within the time limit you have to heal, but we all were distracted and missed the deadline. So that is all on us, but it's been a great team, and so I'm looking forward. This current round is still going on. They take a break after that, so I'm looking forward to round 13 when it starts up again, because hopefully our team will stay as it is, and we will be all paying better attention, and hopefully we will do better in the next round. But anyhow, this is a great a piece to pull out for when I need to get a lot of stitches in. So again, this is Midnight Vigil by Heaven and Earth Designs. Okay, now moving on to the non-full coverage I'd like to show you. So the first one, I think you've probably seen this in a lot of places. This is the Sense and Sensibility Sal. I finished part 2. This is by Mountain Sapphire Handcrafts for the Stitching Book Club. So I finished basically part 2 was these 3 sort of coral flowers up here, these little white flowers here, and these little blue decorations. I don't know, they look like snakes to me, except they're blue. I don't know what they are, but so I think that part 2 was a little bit smaller than part 1. This is on a 28 count even weave I bought this as a kit, and so it was dyed by Kristen, who is behind Sapphire Mtn Handcrafts. Part 3, I believe, drops this weekend, and so I'm really looking forward to finishing this project because they tend to be fairly quick stitches, especially the third part of her designs, or the last part of her designs. And this was my freebie I used for No New Starts, and it will also be most likely my first finish of 2021. This is Sapphire Mtn Handcrafts Stitching Book Club, Sense and Sensibility, Sal. The next project, which I feel like I show every video, is A Year at Hawker and Hollow. So here's what it looks like. I think many of you have seen this one before. It's got vignettes that represent each month of the year. So for Magical Stitches, I'm on Team Titans. One of the prompts was to stitch in something that could be used as a cauldron. And this has a cauldron, so I say a cauldron could be used as a cauldron. And so I'm not working on that particular block. I'm working on the April block. Here's where I am. And I just continued to build this house. Again, because of Master Stitch, I am sort of picking and choosing my colors if I'm working on this anyhow. So black, other, green, whatever I need to use, I've sort of been moving around doing that. And so I was also, as you can see here, I did not complete the borders. I like to start my borders, fill in, and then count and make sure, and that way everything matches. And I was very happy. I finally turned the corner on the border here, and everything from the top to the bottom matched up. Lengthwise, I know the top border is correct because it obviously matched the block above it. So my house does look a little bit lopsided right now, and I've stared at it for a long time, and the conclusion I have is that it's more of an optical illusion. That it's just because this looks so solid here because I have completed all the stitching here and here, obviously with the way the windows are, and I've got this some color here but no color here. It just looks like this is a house that will topple over. But I think once I pull all the colors down, it will look like a solid house like it is supposed to be. And it will survive the April showers that will be the gale force winds that will blow against this house. So again, this is A Year at Hawker and Hollow by Carriage House Samplings. And I am doing this on a 36 count Picture This Plus Heartland in the color Heartland, and I am doing 2/2. The next piece that I work on is an old one. It is called Apple Sampler. It is from an issue of Just Cross Stitch Country Crafts from the 90s. And this was part of the monthly magazine Cross Stitch Challenge. And this is where I am. This was it was the first piece I started for that challenge. And I pulled this one out because I needed, again, for one of the challenges to put in a lot of stitches very quickly. And this is I think it's a 16 count aida. So it's very easy to stitch on, very easy to see. And this is a repetitive border. So it was just very easy for me to fly in and put a bunch of stitches in very quickly. And so I worked on the border and then just extended some of these lines here. I do know that I have to go back and make a few corrections, follow it a little bit more closely over here. My 6, I think, is a stitch too wide, a stitch too wide. And I wasn't going to pull everything out to fix it. So I'll just make sure that when I get over, and I'm not sure this apple is in the right place as a result. I don't remember if I counted off the 0 or I counted off the flower above it, but I'll just make sure that my lines extend evenly over. So I need to fix that. I also cut out one of the rows here that had some big apples under the tree above the first line of letters. I didn't like the apples, so I just need to make sure that when I get towards the top of this, that this ends in a place that makes sense. It won't be hard. I just need to slow down and not keep stitching and all of a sudden realize my border has like gone all the way up here. So again, this is a fairly easy stitch. I like working on it. I don't necessarily like the colors in it. The apples seem to have some interesting, the shading is not very subtle. And so my apples have bright red, bright orange, and bright yellow. in them. And apples, well, maybe not bright orange, but apples certainly can be various shades of red and yellow and green, but they tend not to be bright in all of them. So, but for the most part, I am enjoying stitching this, and again, it's a nice break when I need something that's relatively easy. The next thing that I pulled out, also one that I started for, I started it in late 2020, so I could get 200 stitches in for no new starts, but I knew I was going to do this in February for the monthly magazine cross stitch challenge. I'm doing this Love One Another, and this is from also, I think this is Cross Stitch Country Crafts, also from the 90s. I did a lot of work. I did some work on this in February, but I pulled it out again this month because in Magical Stitches this week, one of the prompts was to stitch 500 stitches in yellow or gold. And so here's where I am now. I did this O was not quite complete with the sort of seafoam green, so I finished up that color so it would be round. And then I have started doing sort of the outline in the yellow. So I did the T. I've completed, I think, most of the O. I might need to have, I think I ran out of thread. I might need a few quarter stitches here, but for the most part, the O is done. I'll do the same to the H. And then this is one, and actually the whole top half of each of these letters are in yellow as well. And so I'm hoping that will provide me enough to have my 500 stitches. There are a couple of yellow roses down at the bottom, sort of over here. But I'm hoping that my colors I'll have enough stitches here, between here and on the H, that I won't need to move the Q-snap quite yet. And this is a 14 count black Aida. I've had this piece of black Aida in my stash probably for 20 years. So it's quite stiff. One of the challenges of working on it is that this does have quite a few quarter stitches. Normally I don't mind, but this Aida is almost impossible to pierce. And so I find that I have to, instead of just poking straight down, I have to go towards the side and go under the threads in the middle of the square. And it adds a little challenge and does slow me down because I do need to have really good lighting, because I'm trying to actually see the threads of the fabric and not just the holes in the fabric. But again, it's not impossible. Once I figured out that's what I needed to do, it's not a problem to do it. I just really can only work on this in the daytime so I can have the proper light to see it. I do have good lamps and such, but I find that with sunlight, it works out much better. And my stitchy spot during the afternoons gets the western sun, and so it's very easy to work on. So this is Love One Another from Just Cross Stitch and Country Craft. Now, the next project I'm working on, I've showed quite a bit, and I'm sure you all have seen it in lots of places. It's the Blue Flower Huckleberry Farm. And so last time I showed this to you, I was working on the mountain range. I had the bear done. So what I did this time was I finished, I think I had to finish all of the greenery here. I know I extended this sort of here, the branch here, and the branch down here. I may have done some of this purple stuff. I can't remember exactly where I was the last time I showed it to you. The main reasons I'm working on this one, in addition to absolutely loving it, but for the challenges, it was my whip go call for March, and so I had to put 1,000 stitches in. I've achieved that because this is quite a densely packed mountain range. It's full coverage. I'm also using it for letters of the month, F for Huckleberry Farm, the F in farm. And so this is a project though that I really love, and I'm trying to find lots of excuses to pull it out. Because of it's a 32 count linen by Prejudice Plus, the color Whimsey. I am doing 2/1. I have made numerous counting errors on this, and I have had to pick out quite a few things because I've started something, and it's not just that I'm 1 or 2 stitches off, it's like totally in the wrong place. So I had a couple of berries that I had done up here, and I don't know what I counted it off, but they were just in the wrong place. And so while this piece doesn't have a traditional border in the sense that it doesn't go all the way around, it just goes sort of up the sides and then towards the middle. And you probably could fudge if you wanted to. I didn't want to have to sort of always try to remember what was correct and what wasn't. So as a result, I did pick out a few of the things that I needed to do. I frogged them, and I have, so the berries haven't gone back in, but a number of the other mistakes I have corrected. But I really am enjoying working on this project, and it is, again, the Blue Flower Huckleberry Farm. The next project that I'm working on is Stars Bright by Lindy Stitches. This is also my WIPGO call for my second piece for March, and my goal was to put in 1,000 stitches. So this was a start I did in Mania last year, so May 2020. I never worked on it again until I picked it up now, and I remembered why I had not worked on it. So here's where I am now. Let's see if I can get something behind here. Here's where I am now. All I did was I did a little bit more in these granny squares because I tried to use this a little bit for Master Stitch. I tried to use this a little bit for Master Stitch. As a result, that's why the colors look a little bit off. But I think the reason why I stopped working on it, and this little tag is going to drive me crazy, doesn't even tell me anything. But I think what happened was this was, I think, the first piece that I actually did on linen. I had worked on evenweave before, but this was my first piece of linen, and I think I made a mistake, and I ended up doing one of those like skinny X's where I went up two but only over one somewhere, and I think it's somewhere in here. And so I had started here, so theoretically this was correct, and then I made this mistake here and tried to pick up. And I think the mistake is like exactly right in here somewhere. And I tried to correct it, and I think I did okay on this one, but then when I got down here, it just was totally wrong. So what I made a decision, now that I'm a little bit more comfortable working on linen, I am going to continue working in this direction. And I'm going to fill in these granny squares here. This line I think is correct as well. And then that is like the branch for the bird. And again, that looks a little bit weird because I needed some brown for Master Stitch. And so I wanted to go, I think what I will end up pulling out is just this stuff here and then just stitching back and doing that. But I think I just want to get more of the project done before I make that decision on that's what I need to do. Normally I wouldn't care so much, except then all my granny squares are going to start looking off. And even though the colors are not important, the symmetry is, and I don't want to have that sort of unbalanced symmetry on this side of the pattern. So it really isn't that many stitches to pull out once I get going. And again, the granny squares, once you get into the pattern, are quite repetitive. But I overall do love the pattern. And this fabric is 32 count linen from Picture This Plus, and I believe the color is mint. Yes, I did actually write mint on that side of the tag. This one just has a bunch of numbers. That's what this is. And I think I just need to get a little bit more rhythm into it and a little bit more comfortable getting back into this. And now that I know where my mistake is, just to work over this way. I do have probably 300 or 400 stitches I need to put into this to meet my WIPGO goal. I know a lot of people do WIPGO where they say these are yearly goals, but my challenge that I set for myself was trying to get them done in the month that they are called. And if I don't get them done, that's fine, but I'm not going to go back and say, well, I'm going to go back and do what I missed. I'm just going to move on and keep working because that's sort of the way I set up the WIPGO challenge for me. So that's all the stitching I wanted to show you for the past couple of weeks. I did work on some other projects, but didn't have a lot of progress in them, so I didn't have the need to show them. But what I do want to show you are some of the things that I finished since late 2019 and into 2020. I haven't had a chance to fully finish them. Some of it is because I'm going to attempt to finish some projects on my own and just sort of giving myself the time to figure it out. I've watched tons of tutorials, and thank you to everyone who has done tutorials. I've watched Vanna Pfeiffer, the Twisted Stitcher. I've watched Liz from Elizabeth Ann Can Stitch. I've watched Helen D. And there are others as well who have great tutorials. And I'm using all of them to try and give myself a confidence boost. And so at some point I just have to bite the bullet and actually stop watching and start doing. But until then, I'll just show you the finishes I have. And then a couple of pieces as well I will take to get professionally framed, simply because I put a lot of time into them. So the first piece I want to show you is, so this is Suffrage Act Proclaimed. Honestly, I don't remember the design company right now, but I think many of you have seen this. This was on a 32 count linen. It colors lamb's wool. I think it's XG design, but I'm not 100% sure. And this was obviously, I completed it last year in honor of the 100th anniversary of the amendment for the rights of, they say women to vote, but we all know it was really the rights of white women to vote, that other women had to wait longer before they could actually utilize the rights that they should have had. But nonetheless, I, for the most part, used the called for colors. The only change I made was all of that light color white in her dress and on the column and stuff. I did change that from grits, which was called for, to just DMC Blanc, because the grits on this fabric wasn't showing up very well. I also ran out of black coffee, which is what all the lettering at the top is. And down here, this was supposed to be, this little stripe here was supposed to be on black. I decided to do it in white. I honestly don't love it. I may pull it out and put something else in. But you know, once I finished it, I was sort of like, I'm done. So there wasn't a lot of energy to pull out something. So I may just leave it that way. And at the time I was completing this, it was in the summer, fall time, and there was just a shortage of all of the fancy flosses. And so black coffee was nowhere to be found. And so I couldn't order another skein. So I just went and pulled from the pattern the color I already had. So that's my first finish. My second finish from 2020, or another finish from 2020. Here we go. And let me get a piece of paper behind this. This is Kitty and Me, and this is Colorful Bunny. I did this as part of a stitch along hosted by Carla at Cobweb Corner, and she did a stitch along for all the various Pamela Kellogg designs of the colorful animals. The vast majority of the animals are cats, but she has an eagle as well. She has a couple of bunnies. This is one of them. I think I've seen a butterfly, but she's got probably a dozen cats at least. So this was a really fun stitch. It's not really showing up great, but a lot of like in the ears here, down here, that sort of everything except for the eyes. The really dark color that you're seeing is actually a purple Krynic. And so in real life, it does sparkle quite a bit. And this I just did on a pink linen by Witchelt. I like the color. It's a very stiff linen, which makes it great for stitching, but not so much, the feel of it isn't so great. And when I was washing this, I thought, great, I'll get some of the stiffness out, but as soon as it dried, it got stiff again. But overall, I did really enjoy stitching this. It was a lot of fun. The next item I have is another one from the Stitching Book Club. This is The Secret Garden. This was one of the books that she did in 2020. And so when it is fully finished, the way that Kristen did it was she actually sort of made this into a door, and then she put it in a shadow box. I love the door concept. Obviously, it's got the hinges here and the lock and everything. I'm not sure I'll put it in a shadow box, but I do love the idea of making this into a door, and the pattern is absolutely gorgeous. I love those robins on it. This was a lot of fun to stitch. Again, this is something that she had in the, when she knew we were going to read this book, it was in the middle of she made the decision probably in late 2019 or early 2020, then the pandemic hit. So I think a lot of people were struggling to get the right fabric for this. But I was very fortunate. I had a piece of brown fabric in my stash. Again, a really, really old piece. I'm sure I just bought it at some big box store somewhere many, many years ago and never stitched on it. but and she was really keen on making sure it was a brown, because the finished product, obviously she wants it to look like a door. This is not the shade that it was called for, but I think it works out really well, and the colors that were on there really pop on it. So I was really happy that I was able to utilize something from my stash. And even the DMC colors that she called, I think I had 75% of them in my stash, and so it was very easy to work on this. I did source all the others and was able to complete it on time. Another one from the Stitching Book Club. This was the first one that she designed for the Stitching Book Club, and this is for obviously Pride and Prejudice, and she did a really, really lovely job on this one. I think this is the largest one that she has designed. She has gone smaller after this because she realized it was hard for people to keep up, but I absolutely loved this. This is just a 28 count Lugana that I did it on color white, so but really, really lovely to stitch on, and I really this is sort of what convinced me as a designer to trust her, and so that's why I don't do a lot of mystery stitch alongs, but because of just this one and how lovely it turned out, I have done others. I'm obviously working on my third one with her right now. Next piece I want to show you, this is Let Joy Be Unconfined by the Blue Flower. This was one of their Be Well and Stitch designs that a lot of the designers came up with free patterns. I absolutely loved this one, and I wanted to stitch this from stash entirely. So she had charted it with dinky dies, but I just picked a, I just took a piece of, I think this is a 14 count Aida from my stash and just pulled colors that I didn't have in other projects. I'm not necessarily the best at picking my colors, so in hindsight I might have done a few things a little bit differently. For example, in these flowers here, there are supposed to be various shades of sort of copper red, and I think the colors I picked were too close to each other, so you lost that contrast. But overall, I think it came out fine. I don't even remember what the colors she had for the lettering, but this was just that was probably the least important, but it came out. I really liked this color. I think it's like either 3810 or something like that, but just a really pretty blue I had in my stash. And so this was a lot of fun to stitch on, and thank you to Janine from the Blue Flower for providing this to everyone for free. And I've seen a number of other people stitching it as well. Disney Period. I use the hashtag Be Well and Stitch. I follow it on Instagram, and so from time to time it pops up, and I just love to see how people have utilized different colors to sort of bring this design to life. The next one I have is another one from Lindy Stitches. This is a Stitch for Sweet Freedom. So this is on a 32, I think it's a 32 count linen. I don't remember the color. It might be Ariel. Picture This Plus. I think many of you have seen this one as well. It says A Stitch for Sweet Freedom, one for being kind, two for diversity, and one for an open mind, or humble mind, excuse me, but open mind would work as well. Just a really lovely stitch. I love the skirt in her that the girl has, and just the colors that Stephanie chose for this are really, really beautiful. So I really enjoyed working on this. And this was after I decided not to be a monogamous stitcher. This was the first project that I started. And then the last piece that I have, this was one, it took me almost 2 years to complete, and I was primarily a monogamous stitcher on this one. I did complete the Pride and Prejudice stitch along at the same time I was working on this. And here this one is. See if I can back up far enough for you to see it. This is Grand Teton by Mystic Stitch. I've just done this on an 18 count Aida. I think this is absolutely a gorgeous piece. I love the coloring. I love the majesty of the mountain back there and the colors of the wildflowers up front. It is definitely one of these designs that you can't look at too closely, because then you do see, you lose the detail of the flower. And it, of course, in the camera, it's looking absolutely wonderful. The flowers very much up close. You can, you lose some of the subtlety, and you do see some of the pixelation, but, even from 3 feet away, all of that is gone, and you see these the gorgeous flowers and the colors in the lake and the reflection and the sun shining through the clouds. So I loved working on this piece, but I think part of the reason why I stopped being a monogamous stitcher was there were times I would get frustrated with this piece, and I kept plowing ahead. And I'm glad that I continued to work on it, but there were times it would have been nice just to have sat this down for a little bit and worked on another piece. For those of you who have worked on Mystic Stitch pieces in the past, they are absolutely gorgeous. But sometimes, and this was a paper pattern, their paper patterns can be hard to follow. I find the symbols a little bit small. They don't repeat symbols on the next page. It's very clear in the 10 square blocks where everything lines up, so it is easy to follow, but it's, you're still wanting to make sure that you're doing everything exactly correctly. It's fine if you're working above or below the very dark line, but when you are working in a, if you're at line 5, you want to make sure that you're actually working on line 5 and not line 6 or something, if your counting is a little bit off. But overall, I have quite a few patterns by Mystic Stitch that in my stash, and I have 2 of them that I'm actually working on right now. So I'm used to dealing with their patterns, and I am willing to put up with some of those frustrations because they do have such beautiful designs. So those are ones that I'm hoping either now that I am starting to feel a little bit more confident with having gotten my first vaccination, and in the next month or so, I really would like to take a couple of these to the framer and have them professionally done. And then with the others, moving from watching tutorials to actually acting and learning from them and putting that knowledge into practice. So that's all the stitching I want to show you. I have one piece of haul, and that is it. I am in Fortnight Fabrics, month of the club. I do the gray. I do a 32 count even weave. So this is the one. I do get a fat. This is a fat quarter. I've got it folded in half. This is the color. I call it Round Trip. So it's quite, as you can see, quite mottled. Sort of cool undertones in it. It's a really beautiful piece of fabric. So that's all for the stitching and everything related to that. So what have I been reading? So I have been reading, I have books that I read on either hard copy or on my Kindle, and I also listen to audiobooks. So I actually, I guess for some reason, I've been doing more audiobooks than I have Kindle. So, but I am in the middle of several books. But the ones that I finished 2 books in the past 2 weeks. Both of them were audiobooks. One of them I really don't recommend. It's called Catherine House by, I believe it's Elizabeth Thomas, and it's supposed to be a dark academia book where there's this great institution of higher learning called Catherine House. But it's one of these places that and they pay for everything, but when students go, they basically are cut off from the outside world entirely for the duration of their studies there. And it's kind of like nothing really happens. And there's this mysterious substance called plasm, and it's supposed to have these wonderful properties, but it's never really explained. And something happens to the main character before she gets to Catherine House that never really is explained. I mean, you find out what happened, but not the real circumstances of it. And I was sort of got to the point that, I finished it, but I was like, what's the point of this book? So do not recommend it. But I picked it up because I was looking for a book. I do a number of reading challenges, and one of them was for Pop Sugar. This was, I believe, was the Dark Academia book. So I was looking for something that fit that prompt, and it checked off that box. But beyond that, I don't feel the need to, it almost ended like there was going to be a sequel. It ended, but questions weren't answered, and I'm sort of like, so what? But the other book that I listened to was Winter by Marissa Meyer. This is the 4th book and the last book in the Lunar Chronicles. I believe she has some other novellas and other books that are tie-ins to it, but not part of the same story arc of the Lunar Chronicles. So for those of you who aren't familiar with it, she's got 4 books that are loosely based on fairy tales. Winter is, again, very loosely based on Snow White, but the idea behind all the books is that Earth, many, many years ago, colonized the moon, and the people in that society developed, or a number of them developed, certain gifts. And they eventually became their own sort of kingdom, for lack of a better word. On Earth, many of the continents basically have consolidated. So you have a number, you've got the Americas, you've got the Eastern Federation or something like that. You've got Europe, you've got Africa. They're basically one, each of those are sort of their own conglomeration and different forms of government, but and so basically now that they have these special powers on Moon, the people there want to take over, not the people. The queen wants to take over Earth, that you always have to have in all of these fairy tales, evil stepmother or evil queen, something like that. I would say overall, I enjoyed the entire series. I will say Winter, I was ready for this thing to be done. You have basically a bunch of teenagers, and they're all beautiful and they're all smart, and they're out to save the world. And I get it, these are young adult novels, that's what happens. But I think what frustrated me the most was a couple of things. One, there are scenes in the book that are very violent, and if that's your thing, that's great. But definitely R-rated violence if this were to be a movie. But these kids don't do anything but kiss. They've met their true loves and all they do is kiss. So that sort of dichotomy, I'm like, if you're going to throw in all the violence, you've got these 18-year-olds who are in these really intense situations and all they do is kiss the boy they have a crush on. That's, and they've been living on a spaceship with him, whatever. That sort of, it's not realistic to me. Not that the whole book is meant to be realistic, but I sort of, in a way, and I don't know enough about young adult novels if that is sort of a line that you don't cross. But that is, to me, it was sort of that disparity. And then again, these are 18-year-olds and all 4 of the lead characters, they get their prince and it's a happily ever after. And, again, I know there are people out there who meet their soulmate, their true love at 18, and they have a really, really great life with that person. But, for someone who spent so much time building up these really strong girls and women who had really amazing capabilities, compassion and intelligence and strength and all of that, and then sort of to be like, and they got the guy in the end, so it's a happily ever after, was disappointing. I really wish this, if only one of them had not gotten the guy, I would have probably respected the series more. And I think at least one of the stories, the fairy tales are based on, there is no prince. It's I think I could be wrong. It's been I don't have kids, so it's been a really long time since I've read fairy tales, but I don't believe in Little Red Riding Hood she marches off with the prince. I think she just gets her grandmother back in the end, and so that was a bit disappointing for me. But overall, I'm glad I did read it, and so I'm sorry, my cat just opened the door, so sorry for the noise that you just heard there. I'm glad I read it, but it's probably not something that I need to go back and read again. So I'm hoping the other books that I'll pick up soon will be a little bit better than those 2 that I've read. What I'm watching is basically, I'm a big sports fan. NCAA basketball men's tournament is going on right now, so my husband and I have been watching a lot of that. And so I know many of you engaged in March Madness stitching style. I did not participate in that because I don't have a lot of smalls. I didn't want to have a lot of starts and all of that. So I didn't do March Madness, but I am watching the real thing and doing a lot of stitching with it and really enjoying it. So my team, Florida Gators, got knocked out in the second round. They've had a really difficult season. They had a player in December who almost died. He was on the court, and it was, I think, during a timeout. And when the timeout was finished, he just collapsed on the court. And so I think he is doing much better. He's alive. He's totally functional. He has not played the rest of the season. He was one of their star players, but I think when you have that sort of, life or death situation with a close friend of yours, it does affect people who are teenagers and, you know, people in their early 20s in ways that it's hard for them to measure. To see someone who is so strong all of a sudden, you know, all of a sudden just collapse, and that impact, and not knowing if he was going to survive the night in the hospital. So the team has had a hard year. There are times that they rallied and they played spectacularly, and there were other times that they did not. And unfortunately, they lost in the round of 32. But I'm going to continue to watch the tournament because I do just love the enthusiasm that the players have. To me, March Madness more than any other sport, because it is win this game or go out, and just the enthusiasm that players have for it. You don't get that in professional sports because, I mean, football is what it is. I hate that expression now, but you know, basketball, hockey, baseball, it's, you know, usually best of 7, and you get a little bit, you know, okay, you have a bad day, you can come back and the next day and rally, whereas you don't get that in March Madness. So that's what I've been watching. That's sort of what I've been up to for the past couple of weeks. If you've made it this long, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate all of your comments and all the nice things that you've had to say about my stitching. If you liked what you've seen, please subscribe, leave a comment, and I hope to see you again in 2 weeks. Thank you. Bye.